Rolling. Hi,
Hello.
my name
Hello.
is Alonza. Thank you
Nice to
for
meet you.
joining. I'll be interviewing you today, so I'll be asking some questions, and I invite you to please share the question before you answer it.
Sure.
So my first question is to share your name and your name and
Tell us about
age.
yourself.
Yeah, your name
My name
and
is Age.
your name and tell us one thing that's important to you.
Oh. My name is Jumaane Williams, the New York City public advocate. And what's important to me is faith, family, and making sure communities can be safe and equitable.
As you came into the library today, what were some of your impressions of the exhibition? What stood out to you about your attention?
Well, what stood out to me as I came in the exhibition, one, I didn't even come in for this. So I came in for a D-theft workshop we're doing, which is not completely separate than what we're talking about with mass incarceration. These communities kind of get dealt a cycle of hurt and trauma that find expression in harmful ways sometimes. But I would say just, I haven't looked at everything, but just reading the quotes and things that are there. There are two things that stuck out to me. I don't remember the sister's name. I think she was a mother, but in one of her quotes, she said, "We're not throwaway people." So that really rang out to me. And the other thing was seeing how much it costs per year. And these are numbers I've seen before, but I don't think I've seen it at almost $200 billion a year to incarcerate folks. And I always think that's interesting because we're 4% of the world's population. We're about 25% of the world's jail population, and we're not one of the safest countries. So if incarceration was synonymous with safety, we'd be a lot more safe.
So with that being said, my next question for you is, if the city had $1 million to invest in public
Nigga,
safety in your
nigga,
neighborhood
nigga,
and
nigga.
asked you how they should invest it, what would you say?
Well, if we're going to talk about investing money, it's something I think about a lot. So I'm going to answer it this way because I usually ask folks to think about what neighborhoods they deem safe, and nobody's ever mentioned the neighborhood that already has the most law enforcement in it, or that already sends the most people to Rikers. And so that says to me that just those things don't equal the safety we think about. The communities that most people deem safe have access to housing they can afford that's safe. They have access to schools that have nurses and social workers and sports programs. They have access to mental health services. They have access to health services. They have access to more than just bodegas to do food shopping. So they have access to a whole set of things. And those are communities that we deem safe. So if I had additional funding, I would put it into one of those things that make the communities that we don't deem safe have some of the resources that the communities we do deem safe. So I think any one of those things would be helpful. Matter of fact, when you ask people, it's always interesting because the news and certain pundits focus on law enforcement, but that's not usually the number one thing that people talk about and when they're talking about keeping their community safe. It's usually third or fourth. There's a lot of things that come before that, but unfortunately, fear and hatred gets folks elected. So that message is the one that pops. I would also say I want to make sure I'm always clear that there has to be accountability when harm is done, but we have we think prevention is synonymous with punishment, and it's just not. And so there's discussions that we should be having separately. We kind of interchange them, well, particularly for specific communities. And if we can't arrest the children of the people we arrested 20 years ago, and think it's going to have a different result.
How to address harm or things that cause people to have violently? And my last question is like, for whatever you were to invest, right, to make community safer, like what do you envision particularly like that antidote or one of like the necessary things will be needed to like contribute to the community safety or be a part of that change?
Well, this is interesting because since I got elected, this is one of the things I've been focused on, which is actual safety. And what's frustrating me the most, can I say piss me off? I don't know what I'm like. It really pisses me off is that both Republicans and Democrats have really failed on this. and it's very frustrating to me because what I've seen some Democratic leaders do is either ignore the harm that people are saying they're experiencing and the violence that's occurring, or they adopt Republican talking points, which will cause more harm. What we need is people who have the courage to stand up and show leadership. We actually know what safety looks like. And so if you go back to, folks are kind of young here, but like there's a movie called Gangs in New York with Leonardo DiCaprio. It's for a different time period when the immigrants. By the way, I should have mentioned I have Tourette's syndrome, so you may see me move, but everything's all right. I get offered a lot of water. Doesn't really help, but I appreciate the offers. But the violence from young people who they were violent against each other, they were violent against law enforcement, and the social elite at that time said, these young people, they need programming, they need upward mobility, they need sources of institutions that will focus on them, and so those things were created for them. The violence, the melanin of the violence changed, and the response changed. And they said these folks are victims of their own self-destruction. And if they had anything, they got law enforcement and prison system. So we actually know what works. We apply it differently depending on the community. And that's just a major problem. We actually saw that with substance abuse. When I was growing up, black community, brown community, crack whores, crack holes, like everything but children of God. The opiate crisis hit a different community, and we saw a different response. It was one that was more human, saying these folks need assistance, they need help, which they do. But it should have been applied to communities that were dealing with it beforehand. And so I always want to have an honest conversation so that we can get the right antidote. Because if we don't, this stuff was done intentionally, long, long time ago. So I say if the quote unquote forefathers woke up, they would probably not understand why we had a black president or why women were voting, but will otherwise think we did a good job of pushing forward a system that wasn't rooted in equity in the first place. And so for me, I'm hoping people hear like nobody's responsible today for that system, no matter what color you are. But I think everybody is responsible for the system that my daughter's going to get and her children are going to get. And so that's where I want to grab it. How can I move the system a little bit so my kids' get a different and better one? Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you. Yeah. I think you have one more. Where? I gotta go. Okay. Yeah, I gotta go.
For public advocate, what do you feel like is a practice that the average person can change without the resources? A lot of people are struggling for not having resources. So what is a practice that they can embed in communities, like individually, to help with the overall?
Well, I always tell folks there's one thing you could do like right now, and that is there's usually young people that folks see when they go to work, when they come home from work. They don't engage. They don't say hello. They don't say how are you. And my one thing is just start engaging. So it's going to be uncomfortable at first because you're not used to it. They're not used to it. People are not used to talking to them. They might have that special cigarette smell on them, so like people are feeling away. But once you start engaging a couple of times, you'll be surprised at what comes back. And invisible people will act invisible. And so I think the one thing we could do that doesn't take money right now is really start engaging with communities, particularly young people who, whether they admit it or not, kind of would yearn for that kind of engagement from folks in the community.
One thing I found interesting from your answers is you need a lot of principles and values that are just written, right? Mm-hmm. Like being rooted in humanity, looking deeper into the root of the issue instead of just like punishment, like your awareness of that. And I just thought that it was just interesting how you speak to a lot of like restorative values.
Yeah.
The approach of like restorative justice.
Yeah.
That they root their philosophy in and addressing crime.
Yeah, I appreciate it. It's hard to hurt the human being. That's why dehumanization has to come first. Whether it's racism or street crews, like they have to call somebody a different name, because you can't hurt a human being as easily as whatever you fill in the blank is. And so rehumanization is usually a big part of it. But also not ignoring the harm that's done. It's important as well. I appreciate y'all. Peace. Thank you. Appreciate it, buddy.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, man. Appreciate you. Peace. Thank you.